15.
Imagine it is March 1999, and I am in a little Caribbean restaurant on Exmouth Market, not far from the Observer's offices in Clerkenwell. I'm having lunch with a woman called Cheryl Garrett. That's useful, isn't it? A bit of light. A bit of a legend in the magazine world. She was the editor of The Face and is now the editor of the Observer magazine, for who I'm a general feature writer. I write about the marriage business at Gretna Green, about terrestrial porn channels auditioning people to read the news without the benefit of clothing. We chat and we gossip, and eventually she says, by the way, the restaurant critic is stepping down to become the TV critic. Can you think of anybody who would like to go out for lunch on expenses and write smart-ass things about it? I say to her, that's not a job you can apply for, is it? Because if you did apply, I mean, the pile would be enormous. It would be impossible, but then I say, look at me, this body with nipples in different time zones, it's not an accident. I love restaurants. I love restaurant reviews. I read them. Jonathan Mead's in the Times, Matthew Fort in The Guardian. I'm addicted to them. Why don't I do it? 2 weeks later, she came back and she said she had good news and she had bad news. The good news was that she wanted me to be the restaurant critic. The bad news was that the overall editor of the paper didn't. He wanted me to carry on writing features about the marriage business in Gretna Green or terrestrial porn channels auditioning people to be newsreaders without the benefit of clothing. You were hoping for photographs with that, weren't you? I'm afraid there aren't any. He had a better idea. He wanted the chief political columnist for The Observer to be our restaurant critic because Andrew Rawnsley took a lot of people out to lunch. Thought he could maybe double up in some way. There were 2 problems with this. The first one was that all the places that Andrew tended to take people to lunch were in 15 minutes walk of this place. And the other problem was that he didn't actually want to be the restaurant critic. But he was a good soldier, and it was agreed that we would alternate. He wrote 1, I wrote 10. He wrote another 1, I wrote another 10, and then he went off to write his big book on the Blair government. Afterwards, he said to me, I can write a political column on anything, and he can. He's one of the best in the business. He said, I've written 2 restaurant reviews, and that really is all I've got to say on the matter. Whereas this is dated to pretty much 25 years to the day back from when my latest book was published. It turned out I had a bit more than just 2 restaurant reviews in me. It went on, and it went on, and it went on. Now, the question is, how do you mark 25 years writing one particular newspaper? Because it's not normal. It's not the way it's meant to be. You're not meant to write a column for 25 years. Well, all that time, I have been a keen cook, and I've been taking my favorite ideas home with me from the restaurants and reverse engineering them and coming up with recipes at home. And so as a result, I've written a cookbook. Isn't it gorgeous? Isn't it beautiful? Look at the fabric binding. It should be said you can get a signed copy after the show, although an unsigned copy is probably worth a little bit more in this day and age. It really is. Now, I regard this as a great act of bravery. I put myself in the same context as Ken Tynan, the theatre critic of The Observer, who then actually went on to produce a few plays. I see myself in the tradition of Francois Truffaut, the original film critic who went on to be the founding father of the Nouvelle Vague and then crowned his career with a performance in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I see myself in the tradition of those 4, not the one in the middle. It's an act of bravery as far as I'm concerned. Now, I know that you will have questions, or maybe you don't. You're here now, so you just have to put up with this for the next 12 minutes or so. But I'm going to ask myself some questions and then answer them. The first one being, just who the hell do you think you are? What qualifications do I have to be a restaurant critic? The absolute answer is none. There are no qualifications to, HNDs in master sauces or identifying 10-course tasting menus or spilling gravy down your shirt, although if there was, I think I'd probably ace them. You build a career as a freelance journalist, which is what I was. I'd started at university, one piece at a time, proving that your pieces are readable, entertaining, and won't get you sued. In case you're wondering about this picture, I wanted an image which summed up the defamation system in the UK, and I couldn't find anything online, so I went to an AI image generator. And it came up with that, and I thought maybe my prompt is the issue. So I then said, please give me an image of someone in a judge's wig, and it just got weirder. AI is going to dominate our lives, but we are at that stage where we can point and laugh, and I really think we should point and laugh. One of the issues in journalism is people think that legal law, libel law, is all about what would happen if you went into court. It isn't. It's really about exchanges between lawyers. This piece from a few years ago was about a Korean-American chef called Judy Ju, and when her press release came out about her new Korean restaurant called Jinju, it said that she trained with Gordon Ramsay. So being a dutiful reporter, I went to the Gordon Ramsay organization and said, is this so? And it was like they were gagging to be asked. They issued a statement saying, no, she just did a couple of days work experience with us. I sent that to Judy Ju. Overnight, she got one of the most expensive legal firms in London, Shillings, to send me a 15-page letter full of endorsements by other chefs. So I sent that to the Gordon Ramsay people. They issued another statement. I sent that to Judy Ju. She sent me a 10-page legal letter. It went on for 3 months. Occasionally, I would ask her, do you fancy having a chat? She'd send me another legal letter. Eventually, we got the piece into print, and basically, the restaurants, yeah, it's fine. I was a general reporter before I started this job. I wrote stuff about the art world. I wrote murder stories. I was, for a little while, the sex correspondent from a male point of view for Cosmopolitan. I mean, the reality was, the woman who became my wife, I've been with her since I was 20, and there hadn't been a lot of action before, but I was a good reporter, so it was absolutely fine. It worked in each way that it needed to. But I had to convince her that, I could write a restaurant column. And the interesting thing is that in that first year, I only got one letter of complaint, possibly because in 1999, to complain, you had to get a stamp and an envelope, rather than just go below the line and bang away at the keyboard like a furious monkey. My 3 pieces, there was this one, look at this, the latest craze for Spanish cooking. It's almost a blissful vision of us when young. I went out of London to Shropshire, and this is the piece. It's very close to here, the cow. Tom Conran's place. I wrote about the Francis Bacon triptych that he had on the wall. I don't know if anybody in here knows Francis Bacon's work. It's not an aid to the digestion. Bit of an atrocity. And I said so, and he wrote me a letter saying, well, you have put at risk my great work. And I said, well, maybe you shouldn't have put it on the wall of a public restaurant. That was the only letter of complaint. So right now, I think, yes, I do know some things. I've spent 25 years, I've worked in restaurants, I've worked front of house and back of house. But that doesn't really answer the question, which is what justifies me to do this job when we can go online and read almost anything. Well, here's almost anything that people have written online. Rubbish. If you like oven chips, microwave food, very embarrassing service, avoid at all costs, there is better restaurants. I think I can do better than that. And that's the point. If you're going to get paid for it, you have to do better than they're doing for free. I have to say my favorite one of these is not about restaurants at all. It's a review of Ben Nevis. You're all just reading at this point, aren't you? Also, there is snow at the top. I don't like a snow. I think for the moment, I'm probably safe. Next question, what do you mean by reverse engineering a dish? All the way through, I really have, if I've sat in a restaurant and eaten something that I really liked, thought maybe I could try this at home. It's not a replacement for what you get in the restaurant, but it is an approximation. This is an iconic salad, if such a thing exists. It's a crispy duck salad from originally a Le Caprice. I first ate it at the Ivy on West Street when it was still good. I'm still a restaurant critic, people. It was created by Mark Hicks, put on the menu. Originally, it didn't sell because it was made with crispy pork, and he didn't understand why it wasn't selling until he realized a lot of his clientele was Jewish, or Jewish, because the place wasn't kosher. He changed it to duck. It has the flavor profile of crispy duck with pancakes. And I went home and came up with a method of making it, and then I had a look at the actual recipe online. It's a conscientious chef's recipe. It's take 12 duck legs, simmer them in aromatics for 3 hours, break them up, deep fry them, turn them in a sauce with 7 ingredients, and so forth. It's really quite complicated. What I did was I took 2 confit duck legs, fried them, broke them up, and turned them in hoisin. And you get a very nice salad. Now, I went to all the chefs who were involved, whose dishes inspired a recipe in my book, and told them what I was doing, including Mark Hicks. And when I told him what I was doing, he said, yeah, that would work. And it is a very nice salad. Now, this is a tour de raison. The next question, aren't you just an insufferable snob? Well, I have 2 points to say. The first one is snobbery is not necessarily a bad thing. Snobbery is what gets us better stuff. If you discern between something that's awful and something that's better, that's okay, even if you give it a name, a pejorative. But I understand what the question is asking, which is, aren't restaurant critics just people who constantly eat roast swan? And obviously there's a bit of that. But not entirely. So when I was doing this book, I wanted to cover the gamut. It's none of the grand restaurants, because chefs like Raymond Blanc or Gordon Ramsay, they have their cookbooks, don't need me. But I wanted to cover other restaurants. There are some well-known names like Greg's. I almost thought Greg's is a fascinating business. They have about 2,400 branches, founded in the mid-21st century. £2, slightly more than £2 of every 100 spent on the high street is now spent on Greg's, and a lot of them on the steak bake. Launched in 1999, there are now sold 45 million a year. Not all of them to me. But I thought it would be fun. That's 15 minutes, isn't it? It really is. That's it. I've got another 5, haven't I? I've got another 5. So where is the egg timer? Oh, there it is. I was looking at my phone and my phone went off. We're fine. Hooray! So I thought it would be fun to see what I could come up with if I used a little bit more steak than they did. And some real beef stock and some real veal jus, and put it on pastry and, glazed it and put it in the oven and turned up like that. The Greg's Steak Bake, I mean, this is where it may be true that I am an insufferable snob. The Greg's Steak Bake costs about £2.40, and that cost is justified by 70% gross profit. So 30% pence of ingredients become £1. So the Greg's Steak Bake, they charge £2.40. It's probably about 70 pence of ingredients. Mine, they'd have to sell for £12, so I think they're probably fine. I also did a version of the McDonald's apple pie. I'm not proud, but it is very, very nice. In answer to the question, I will say I am not a snob, but I possibly am insufferable. How do you roast a chicken? This is an interesting question. There are certain things that restaurants are brilliant at. They're brilliant at fancy, detailed things. Look at that torched mackerel with mango. They're brilliant at chicken terrines. They think they're brilliant at being witty and serving food on shovels or in dustbin lids. I was once served food in a mini galvanized dustbin. It was a spare rib selection. And it was exactly the same make and model of mini galvanized dustbin as my then 16-year-old son had in the corner of his room, and I knew what the contents was. And it really wasn't an aid to the digestion. There are other things that restaurants aren't good at, but they think they are. Roast potatoes, for example. A little peace and quiet develops as people gaze upon the roast potatoes. Almost certainly everybody in this room makes roast potatoes better than restaurants do, because it's not a thing that restaurants are good at. They probably make a better apple crumble, and they certainly make a better roast chicken. In service of you, I have eaten some terrible roast chickens over the years. Flabby skin, dry meat. Now you know how much I've suffered. But there are some totemic ones, like the black-leg chicken from La Petite Maison, the Zuni Café chicken, and this one from L'Ami Louis. This is L'Ami Louis in Paris. A.A. Gill, in one of his pieces, said it was the worst restaurant in the world, described it as looking like the interior of a Slovenian second-class train carriage, and said the tablecloths were a worrying shade of labial pink. But that's Adrian Gill's lines, and I'm happy to get a laugh, because the chicken itself is marvellous, even if it is 120 euros for 2 people. Yeah, but it's kind of worth it. So I came up with one based on Simon Hopkinson's method, which means cake your chicken in butter. You need one of these. No, you don't. And putting croutons around the side. And it ends up looking like that. And I know that I am just about to be running out on the egg timer of time. This has been a little gentle stroll around what Nights Out at Home is about and what I've been doing with my life for the past 2 years. You have some other brilliant speakers to listen to. And as the sand runs out in the egg timer, I will say to 5x15, thank you for having me again. It's a long story, which I can't tell you, but they launched my whole career as a jazz pianist. And for that, I will be eternally grateful. If you want to get the book, I'll be downstairs later. Thank you very much.